Good day, viewers. Welcome back. This is David Oliverio, the Preaching Humanist. That is I, and I have a special guest with me today on our little interview section of the show called Atheist Interviews, the very famous Eric Murphy. High five me,
How's
Eric.
it going, brother? Dude, I'm so happy that you had me on, man. I love this. I love it. So how do we dive in?
Well, I think I'm going to keep my big preaching mouth shut and just ask questions.
Okay.
So, Eric, we've known each other, I don't know, 6 months to a year. We talked here and there. We're both real busy guys. You're super busy. But we've never had a chance to go out to lunch or coffee. And I've always wanted to ask you, because you're such a major part, intricate part of the atheist movement here in Austin and around. I've never got to hear your deconversion story, your background. I'd love to listen to atheists tell their stories, probably as much as I love talking to Christians, because you and I pretty much do the same thing.
Oh, dude, I love it. Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, that's where I want to go. So I want you to go ahead and just go over the Eric Murphy story from the day you were born. Like you remember all that, yeah. All the way up. So just explain what happened to you, how you got enlightened, and you let belief in God go, and all the good stuff. So.
All right, so I got to start by shaming you just a little bit.
Uh-oh.
I met you in the spring of 2017.
What?
So that means we are going on 2 years almost that I've known you. Yeah, buddy.
But you know what? I always tell Eric this. When I talk to you, I tell you this, and you're probably tired of me telling you this, but this is a compliment because you and my son are, I think my son's a couple years older than you, my youngest child, but you guys remind me so much of each other. They just even kind of look like each other. But anyway, so go ahead and jump right
absolutely. So I was raised with a kind of an interesting background. My parents were divorced, and so my childhood was split between homes. And my mother by birth became a very, very fundamentalist hardcore Christian. And she married a man who was very, very fundamentalist hardcore Christian. And so because my father's side, they were me, right? I really kind of, my influence and my background in Christianity came from visiting and being with my mother's side. And she was a born-again Christian. We went to a church called Calvary Chapel, which has since established many franchises. And I think I consider it like a diet evangelical. You know,
a diet
evangelical. Because here's the thing.
Write that one down.
Every once in a while, somebody would speak in tongues. The language of angels. But it wasn't the whole church does it kind of thing.
The gift of tongues.
Yeah, and we all believed in the gift of discernment and the gift, so I consider it just a step below what the Pentecostals would. Okay. Maybe I should say diet Pentecostal.
Diet Pentecostal. Lean and mean Pentecostal, yeah.
Yeah. So, I believed. I was involved in the church. We went to, not only every Sunday, but after church every Sunday, obviously. We had study on Mondays. On Wednesdays, we split, women's Bible study, men's, and there were kids. There was the kids group. Every Friday was softball. It was very busy. It took up our entire lives. Right. And so eventually when I started to question, it was kind of a death by many cuts kind of thing. Death by 1,000 cuts, is that what it's called? Right? So I saw some really screwed up stuff.
When did you start seeing it? What do you remember the age?
I was probably about 8 or 10.
Oh wow.
And the kinds of things that I saw was shunning. Right, there were people who were shunned, and they were shunned for. I remember there was a family that the father liked to dress in women's clothing, and his wife found out, and went to the pastor, and the pastor told the entire congregation, and the entire family was shunned.
Wow.
Right. I also saw, people disowning, gay family members. And that was upsetting. Another thing that got me was this satanic panic. The satanic panic was alive and well in my church. And so you better believe that if you were listening to secular music or you're watching secular TV or movies, that there were satanic messages hidden inside to try and brainwash you away from God. Right? There was this spiritual battle that was going on. But at the same time, I had come to like Harry Potter. And so I read, the first book or two of Harry Potter because those were the only ones that had come out up until that point. And there was someone in the Christian bookstore, right, that was in our church because we had our own little bookstore in there. And he was saying that Harry Potter had satanic verses in it and that it had real life witchcraft and wizardry, and it was teaching children how to cast magic spells.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, Wingardium Leviosa. No, that's not a thing. That's not a thing. And so I got into an argument in the bookstore with an elder of the church. And I remember I turned and I pointed because the Chronicles of Narnia was sitting on the shelf behind me. And I said, how is this different?
Yeah. What's the difference? Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But I learned you can't really do that. And I had to shut up a bit. And I never quit questioning. And the time came when I prayed, I realized that I didn't have a good excuse for why God wasn't speaking back to me.
Excuse me. And this was age, you said?
This was probably by 12,
By
13
12.
at this point. So at this point, I started doubting, but I didn't stop going to church. To everyone and really to myself, I thought it was a problem with me. I thought I was broken. Right? But there's something wrong with me because obviously everybody else feels this and I don't. I should just fake it until I make it. And so I did. And over time, it built up and built up, over the next several years. I wound up stepping away from things. I wasn't as involved. I stopped volunteering.
Tell me about your volunteering. I mean, what did you do when you still believed in the church?
Sure. I taught at Vacation Bible School.
You taught like Sunday school classes and all the, okay.
And that was, on Sundays. Eventually, when I started asking questions that made people feel uncomfortable, they moved me to the child care for the little ones. Who couldn't speak yet.
You got demoted.
I did.
Just by questioning.
Yeah. And eventually, I had gotten to about 16, 17, probably closer to 17, and I had said, I'm not going back to the church.
Wow.
And again, I still thought that I was broken. I thought this was a thing about me, or something wrong with me. Obviously, God is there. I just can't interact for some reason, right? And so I would start asking people, and they said, well, in the end, when I would get to a place that they couldn't answer, they'd say, well, Eric, you got to have faith. And so I was like, what is this faith? Right? I looked it up in the Bible, right? What does it say? Faith is the evidence of...
it's not seen.
Yes.
Hebrews 11, 1 and 2, yeah.
And that made zero sense to me. I didn't even know what that meant, and I would try and ask, and they'd give me these wishy-washy answers. And I remember I had met this older woman who was a Taoist, and she lived a couple blocks away, and I loved talking to her. And she actually had spent 10 years in the Pacific on a nudist colony, right? She was the coolest chick.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
And she gave me her worn old copy of the Tao. And so I read it, and I studied it, and I compared it and talked to her about it. And I thought, oh my goodness, it's the Tao, right? The Tao must be really where it's at. And then I continued to read it and thought, well, this doesn't actually have the answers that I'm looking for. If you read the Tao is about being a good person. It's not about, these doctrines and religious things that we're used to, right? And so I started looking elsewhere. I started looking at other Eastern religions, right? And I started looking at Middle Eastern religions, and none of those felt, I read them and I studied, and nothing felt good. And this was over the next maybe 6 or 7 years, right? After that, I had a friend who was going to sweat lodges and was getting really, really into native religion, right? And so I went and did that. And
peyote,
dude, I did a good number of hallucinogenic drugs, and it was fun. I tripped balls, and
I don't know what that means, but that's okay.
It means that I lost my damn mind.
Okay, I understand that. Yeah.
But it didn't get. I thought that I was experiencing something truly transcendent.
Okay,
but really, I came to realize that it was the chemical interactions in my brain.
Sure.
After that, I had my own place. You know, I was an adult by then, and I always had water bottles in my fridge because Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons would always come by, and they knew on a hot day they could always come to my house, and I had cold water for them.
Yeah.
And whenever they came, I'd bring out my Bible or I'd bring out my Book of Mormon, and we'd study together. And so I studied with them. And by that point, I'd started to become angry and disillusioned. And finally, I had a friend who got accepted to UCLA. He was younger than me. And he went to Alpha Epsilon Pi at UCLA. That's the Jewish fraternity.
Okay.
And so they had a rabbi that was there all the time for the kids, for the students. And so I spent time talking to the rabbi, and I asked all of these seething, these burning questions, and he gave me the same answer. Well, you got to have faith. And I said, what does that even mean? You know, and the time came that he said, why do you believe? Just don't believe if you don't believe.
Wow.
What?
Wow.
I had never gotten that before.
Yeah, and that's from a Jewish rabbi.
Well, they don't care. I mean, if you're not, part of that group, or you don't want to be part of that group, they're not. There's not this push like in other religions to convert the world. Right. And so after that, I became an atheist. I stopped caring about it entirely.
How long did that occur?
About 2 years.
2 years.
A year or two.
Okay.
Yeah, almost 2 years. And
did you go into a little bit of, like a lot of us have gone through, we all have our journey. What did you go through any nihilism? Did you go through any deep depression and sadness and emptiness?
I tried to fill that when I was looking for God. And so by the time I had walked away, I had mourned for a long time. And the time had come that by the time I walked away, I still had some time bombs that would come up, right? One of those time bombs happened when my grandma passed away, right? And I had to confront the idea that, no, she's not in heaven. And then dealing with some family members who capitalized on her death to try and bring me back to Christ, which was incredibly upsetting. And other things like that. But that said, I'd walked away and I had become very smug. I was very, what's the word? I just thought that I was hot shit, man. I was listening to NPR, This American Life, Freakonomics, Radiolab, all shows that I still absolutely adore.
Sure.
But I had taken on this air of knowing more than people, and it was pretentious. It was pretentious.
Yeah.
And
isn't that the view that a lot of believers would take on us, though? I get that a lot.
Yeah, well, you know what? There are some of us who are pretentious. So, yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. That's the same as saying, well, all atheists are angry. Well, if you find out you've been getting lied to your entire life, there's some justified anger to be had.
Absolutely.
Right? That doesn't mean that is our only emotion.
Sure.
But there's a grain of truth in there.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Right? And so when I had come across a podcast called Cognitive Dissonance, I thought, ooh, this sounds right up my alley. That's nice and smug. Yeah, all right. It was a brand new podcast, and it was basically like car talk for atheists. And I'd never heard atheists talking about religion the way that we do, which was without this absolute reverence. And so from there, it was all downhill. From there, I found the Atheist Experience right away. I listened to it.
And this is how many years ago?
I think I was 22 at the time. 21, 22, right around there. And I read I couldn't stop reading. I read Dawkins, Dennett. You know, I listened to Hitch and Red Harris, and I had gone through. I read, you know, Fitzgerald and everything that I was listening to audiobooks, and so David Smalley's show. Thank you. David Smalley's show was doing audiobooks, and so every time they released an audiobook, I listened to it.
Yeah.
And when the time came that I needed to get a second start at life, I realized that where I want to be is in Austin. And so when I moved here, all of my stuff was still in boxes, but that Sunday when the shows came on, I was here.
Wow.
And the first time I came into this building, David, I cried.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. What was it? Obviously, I'm assuming these are tears of joy and happiness and just...
I felt like I belonged.
Yeah, yeah.
I felt like there was community here that I'd never
It's interesting because those of us with that religious background, and you're telling me you went through all that, but you couldn't really find what you're looking for. And isn't that what Christianity and religion always says? We have the answer for everything. You'll find fulfillment, meaning, and purpose in life. While you're getting your drink, I want to bring up something to ask you.
What's up?
With your dialogue with believers, you and I do it, and other activists, we're so involved in this. I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Absolutely.
Well, Eric, you weren't a real Christian. That's your problem. You weren't truly saved. You didn't really know Jesus. If you were a true Christian, you would never have gone through those experiences before. Have you had this before?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I thought that I had felt the Holy Spirit. I had felt those emotions. I had been saved twice, actually. I got saved in one of the congregation members' pool in their backyard, and I was baptized that day.
But was it immersion the correct way? And was it in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ or Father, Son, Holy Spirit? It's got to be done the correct way.
I believe it was in the name of Jesus Christ with oils, and it was full immersion.
Yeah.
The second time, it wasn't a baptism. It was at a Christian rock concert. Oh. And tearfully, I came to the front.
Petra?
I think it was some...
I remember
horrible. It was bad.
It was pretty horrible.
Yeah, but
no comparison. Yeah.
What I would say to someone who's listening to this, what that is it's called the no true Scotsman argument, and the no true Scotsman argument goes like this, right? This person, right? Let's say David. David is not a true Scotsman because a true Scotsman is a Catholic, right? But if you were born in Scotland, you're a Scotsman, right? Yeah. There are these qualifiers that people try and put on something to titles that don't deserve to be there. And so if you're trying to pull someone else's Christian card, Christianity and the word Christian is a self-applied title. If you say you're a Christian, I'm not going to try and impose my ideas of Christianity onto you. I'm going to listen to where you're at. Yeah. Because what that does is it immediately creates a straw man. It goes, here's my version of what you need to be, and you're not. Therefore, you don't fit the mold. Right. And honestly, that's an argument that Christians need to have with each other because the most understanding that I've ever heard someone be is an atheist who listened to someone who said they were Christian and didn't question full immersion or partial immersion. Well, did you bless in the name of this? How do you pray exactly? Because it needs to be exactly my way. No, if somebody said they were a Christian, the atheist tended to believe them. Yeah. And so the answer to that argument, sorry, that's the long way around of saying it, that's the no true Scotsman argument. If somebody wants to say you weren't a true Christian, I mean, tough noogies, man. Yeah,
it happens. It does happen quite often. So you went through your journey, you tested God, you waited on him to answer, you finally came to understand that this is a logical fallacy, that there's really nothing up there, so you let all that go. And I like to hear atheists tell me, and I ask atheists all the time, fellow atheists, secular humanists, are you a better person? Are you happier now since you let go of that ancient belief system? Because Christianity, and you know how that is, the fruit of the Spirit, right, is all these virtues and characteristics come through Jesus. And instead of we're actually happier, better, more moral, and so forth. Did you go through that experience in your life too? Do you feel that you can say you're more liberated?
Well, it's funny because I always enjoyed helping people. I always enjoyed community. I always enjoyed those aspects of things. And when I walked away from church, I didn't walk away from being a good person. And so, there was a church that every Thanksgiving would try and get together as much food as they could to be able to give Thanksgiving meals to people who couldn't afford it. And even though I didn't believe, I went and helped, right? I have a Santa suit, and I would go and visit, and I loved it, And so when it came time for me to look back and actually try and square that, I found that on the other side, it was we're behaving morally. Why are we doing that? Versus, can you be moral outside of Christianity? Well, the funny thing is, we are being moral, right? So why are we being moral? And it wasn't until I asked that question that, yeah, I did. I had an absolute breakdown for a little bit. And the nihilism kicked in, because if there's not this purpose that we're taught from childhood is something that is there for you, then what's the point? If you don't have that, are we living in an ultimately meaningless, cold, distant universe? And really, man, the best meaning there is the ones that we assign ourselves. And we live up to our best hopes and expectations for what we can achieve. And when we do that, the sense of satisfaction, accomplishment, those things are beautiful. It's wonderful. You're not trying to live somebody else's plan. You're living and doing the best you can because you want to. That ownership is what saved me. Ownership of it. When you own being a good person, when you say, I don't need someone to make an excuse for me to go out and do the right thing, all of a sudden, you're free. And if people want to read up on that, read Albert Camus, right? Camus and let's see. The Myth of Sisyphus is a great place to start. The idea of the absurd man. You don't turn away. You don't ignore the fact that we live in a universe that isn't conscious, so obviously does not care. Right? But we look into that darkness and we can still smile because we're still creating our own purpose. And by doing that, we defeat the system that would say that purpose isn't meaningful otherwise.
So bring us along. That's beautiful. Bring us along in your journey. You let go of God belief. You walked into the ACA. You felt a part of it. So you're involved in so much. And I just want to tell you openly, I'm very, very happy that you do what you do. And I thank you for being so involved in what you do here. So tell me your passion, Eric. What is your passion? What do you see happening here, and what would you like to see happen here at the ACA and the entire secular humanist and atheist movement?
Sure. So when I got here, there weren't very many people my age or younger. And over time, more people started coming. The sense of community and belonging, that way that it grew, is something that really deeply touched me. I got to share that experience when I first walked into the ACA with other people. And being able to do that, being able to say, you belong here, right? And I'm not saying in Austin. Yeah, absolutely. You walk into these doors, we're going to welcome you. But you don't have to belong, right? That message is a powerful one. In every way that we can get that message out there. Right, that you can be good without God, that atheists aren't these evil monsters that I used to think they were, right? I remember meeting an atheist as a Christian and looking at them because I was afraid. I was genuinely afraid, and I looked and I thought, I was looking for identifying characteristics of atheism, right? Maybe it's their skin, or maybe it's their
the little horns in the head.
Well, maybe they're super dry and parched and secretly evil. Somehow, I really did think that.
But where did you get that idea?
Where did I get that idea? From the way people talked about atheists before.
Absolutely. Could be from, I don't have a Bible. I took it away. Did you bring your Bible?
My Bible's in the office. Sorry,
but you know where they get that idea.
Yeah.
Of course.
And so what I want to do here is I want to grow the ACA. I want this organization to reach everywhere it can, and I want it to get to as many people as it can. Because even if you don't agree when you meet somebody, when you see somebody who's just a good person, when you can recognize that humanity in another human being, you break that mold.
Absolutely.
And you break that idea. You disabuse them of the illusion that atheists are somehow lesser. And on every front, that's a good one. That's one that I'm wanting to fight for. It's something that I want to dedicate my life to. And as long as I'm able to be a part of this organization, as long as I'm able to be a part of the ACA, I'm going to fight for every voice that can be in front of this camera to be here. You know, I want to reach as many people as possible. I want to, and I know it's not just me. I don't want to be in front of the camera all the time. I want to find other people to be here too, because you don't turn off the TV and go, ugh. Oh, there's just way too much atheist programming. I just can't watch TV anymore. You know, and if that's not the case, then there's room for you on the air. There's room for you in the movement, and there's room for your programming, right? And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Everyone I've talked to, David, that does other shows, that does podcasts, is so welcoming. You know, it's funny because you talk to people who do gaming, you know, or other, you know, genres, and there's this big, you know, fight and, you know, oh my gosh, we have to be the best and screw the other guy. But here, a rising tide lifts all boats.
I'm glad you said that. First of all, 3 words. We lead by example.
Yes, sir.
Right? Back in the authoritarianism Christian days, it was more of a command type thing. You obey. And in the secular movement, we don't get away with that as much, right? We lead by example. So I agree with you. I think passion is so important in activism. And when we, in our respective different branches of activism, we do it differently somewhat and the same, analogous in other ways. But when people catch that passion that we have for making this world better, for promoting positive atheism. And let's not forget secular humanism. That's the thing that really drives, at least me, and I'm sure for you too.
And skepticism.
And skepticism, it's all in there. But the passion part of it, that's what people catch. Now, back when I was your age, when I was still preaching the gospel, I remember people telling me in my 20s and 30s, David, you're not the best preacher in the world, but what we really get from you more than anything is your passion. Right? And passion does rub off. So I appreciate your passion. I love to see it. The inviting, inclusive type attitude we have at the ACA now, and the entire secular humanist atheist movement. We want it to grow and expand. And it just takes people that have passion, and that rubs off on so many others.
One other thing that I would just add on to that is if you don't want to be in front of a camera, that doesn't mean that you can't help. You know, you don't have to come out. You know, there are a lot of people who can't come out for one reason or another, be it family or work or marriage or whatever. There are ways to support this. You know, it can be as easy as leaving a positive review on a, on a podcast app. It can be as easy as sharing it somewhere. And if you can afford it, becoming a patron helps us keep these lights on so we can continue to do it. And everyone giving their best. I mean, if you're an accountant, cool. We could use accountants, you know? If you are a lawyer, cool. We could use lawyers. I mean, we actually have a lawyer who's going to be on my show later. And I absolutely, I have to say, you bring your skills to bear. And we absolutely could use it. So please, if you can, do. And if you can't, you still can. You know, you can empower other people, and we need it.
Good. So what drives you, Eric Murphy, to your atheist activism? What's the prime mover in you? What drives you to do the things that you do for the atheist movement?
What drives me?
What's that prime mover in you that just drives you to do what you do? That
prime mover, for me,
put you on the spot.
No, that's okay, man. Because when I didn't have it, I was still just as passionate. You know,
because you're a compassionate person and passionate person.
Yeah, seeing the effect of having community, right? Seeing the effect of somebody realizing that they're not the only one in the world is incredibly powerful to me, and it brings me to tears almost every time. I live for that. I live for that moment when somebody can be unshackled from this dogmatic view that really is destructive in so many ways.
I know.
And I've gotten to talk to people after starting the Talk Heathen, after being involved in the atheist movement. I've talked to people who said, you helped me get out.
Yeah. Well, you told me one incident. We were in the back. Now, you're here a lot because you're an employee and so forth. But I pop in occasionally, and I was talking with Eric, and you had told me that someone had just messaged you. It was a young man, maybe a teenage boy. You remember that? And he said because of your show, I think it was you and Jamie or whatever, helped him to remove the shackles of religion, and he's free. And just that made you emotional. I know that feeling. It's a beautiful feeling, isn't it, to see people free and happy?
It is. And I don't think I'm ever going to get tired of it. I don't think it's ever going to wear away or become, blasé. It's something that more than anything else drives me to continue doing it. It gives me purpose. And that's a purpose that I'm happy to assign myself. That's a purpose that I'm happy to work to achieve. And when I'm facing those days, because I do have depression, and when I face days that I do look into what feels like darkness, I can reach into that well of knowing that I've helped other people. And I can summon the strength to laugh at that darkness. I can summon the strength to beat it, because that is a worthwhile purpose.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
And I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to be able to do it.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, believers would listen to that, and it's very, in some ways, incomprehensible for some of them, because they would say, well, you just had a spiritual experience, or you need the Holy Spirit to mend these wounds or bring you out of depression. And here you are, this strong atheist, activist, secular humanist, saying that you have ways of coping with these things, with depression and other areas, and you can bring yourself out of that.
Yeah, if you already have depression, you don't need someone to break your leg to sell you a crutch. For someone to say you're broken, here is the fix. You're ill, here is the medicine. What that's doing is that's just making it worse. If somebody says, I had a caller last week who called in and said, if I hadn't have found Jesus, I would have been dead. I never would have made it through my life situation. And the funny thing is, he's talking to somebody who doesn't believe that God exists. And so I'm in this funny position of thinking, dude, that is so awesome. You got through that. You deserve credit.
Absolutely.
You deserve credit. You worked for it. And I'm sure you still work on that every day. And that is something that you shouldn't just give up. I'm not saying to be prideful. I'm saying to be proud.
It's good to be human, and they want to give glory to God. They don't want to give it to man.
Well, and what is glory? It's if you say thank you to the doctor that saved your life, are you giving them glory, or are you acknowledging the work, the effort, and the life's that life spent toward becoming the kind of doctor who could save your life? That kind of acknowledgement is not undeserved.
Right.
And so, I'm...
Beautiful. We got a couple of minutes. I was going to ask you.
Sure, what's up?
So what do you, of all your activism, of all the callers that you have on your show, is there one memorable incident of all the different callers that you can remember that was probably the most memorable? Yeah. The greatest caller you've ever had.
Yeah, it's going to make me emotional.
Is it very similar to, I'm assuming it's similar to the one you just told me. You helped somebody to...
No, actually. No? So my birth mom, I've since talked to, and she told me that it's okay to be able to talk about this on air. She says She told me it's my story and I should be able to. She is no longer in that extremely Christian marriage. She got away from that, and it's very good. Okay. And while she still believes, she doesn't believe with the fervency that it would require to disown someone. And so it's still not something we really talk about. She knows that I'm in it, but she's, well, to get to the call, the very first episode of season 2 of Talk Heathen, it was right after Christmas, and I was on with Matt Dillahunty, and my mom called. And she said she's watched the show, and I was afraid. And she said, son, I'm proud. She said, I want you to be happy, and I feel like you are making a difference in people's lives, and that's making people happy. And I'm proud of you.
Wow. That's beautiful she said that.
And my ability to interact after that, being able to know that it wasn't something that I needed to hide, but something that my mom could say that about. You know, I mean, at the time, I was still new to it, and I had spent a lot of time around Matt, and I was, you know, falling over myself a little bit and doing the fangirl thing, and I got to sit next to somebody who was this pillar, you know, of what I had listened to for years, like 8 years. And I cried because there was nothing more important. There was no word that Matt Dillahunty, there was no word that anybody else could tell me that would have been more effective than my mother calling me and saying, son, I'm proud. I'm proud of you. And that's something that I'm always going to carry.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah, that was the best call.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks for being so open and passionate and all that you do on your show and everything else that you do. And you've encouraged me too. I remember your words to me and my little team about the simple call to action to get out there and do what we're supposed to do. So we learn from each other. And that's the beauty of being in a group, right? This collectivism that we have here. Because I was out alone being a Lone Ranger activist for years. I mean, is it better in a team? It's wonderful to have a team here, and we have a really good team here.
We really do.
And it's just beginning to me. It's just, and the beautiful thing is you're much younger, and you young guys have a long road ahead of you, an exciting road of building this.
I hope so.
You do. So, you know what? We're going to have to let you go because you got a show coming up here in a couple minutes, and I got to let you go. So,
dude,
thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. I had a blast.
It was great. Thank you so much. Viewers, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.